Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Nose Bros. Today I was going to talk to you about boots. And normally when I talk about boots I review a pair of boots, but I was actually going to review a line of boots, a brand of boots. It's actually 2 brands of boots, but it's one manufacturer. And I wanted to compare and contrast the two really quickly in a short video just to kind of give you an idea if you're leaning towards one or the other. Because you probably don't even know about one. I mean, most people don't. Some people do, I guess. So we're going to talk about Doc Martens. Specifically, we're going to talk about the made in England Doc Martens. The reason I say that is because Doc Marten made a move about, I don't know how many years ago, but they moved about 90% of their production to Thailand and Vietnam. And this is not to slight Thailand or Vietnam. They make great stuff in those countries. And Southeast Asia itself makes some great boots. There's a couple of great companies there, Junkard, Fortis, a few others that make really nice boots. This is more, a cost-cutting measure for Doc Martens, sending them over there and manufacturing them. The reason I say that is because if you buy a Doc Marten from Vietnam or Thailand, you're paying about $150. If you buy one that's made in England, it's about $270. At a certain point, you have to wonder how much of that $120 in difference is warranted. Are they made with cheaper materials in Thailand? Are they, is the quality control lower? Or is it just that they're paying people less, which is kind of scumbaggy in its own way? And but it's kind of on brand for England. They did exploit the Irish, the Scottish, the Welsh, Australia, India, large swaths of Africa, and the United States for a while. These are the people that made exploitation popular. So I guess we can't fault them for doing what they do. But we're going to talk about the made in England Doc Martens because made in England Doc Martens are kind of a tricky thing. Doc Marten was produced by NPS. Like the shoes themselves were built by a company called NPS, which is Northamptonshire Productive Services Shoes, NPS shoes. I didn't name them that. They did way back in the 18 whatever. So that's their own choice. It's a mouthful. It's a lot to work with. But they were making their own brand of shoes, Solovairs, and labeling them Doc Martens. So if you wore Doc Martens back in the 80s or 90s that were made in England, you probably were wearing Solovairs shoes or Solovairs boots that were labeled Doc Marten. When the Doc Marten decided to send their boots overseas, actually it's not really overseas if you go that way. Inward, right? I guess it's overland to Vietnam and Thailand. Well, you have to go across the English Channel. So we're going to say overseas. So when they sent their manufacturing overseas, they sent about 90% of it over there. 10% were still made in England. Now, for 35 years, NPS Shoes was making the Doc Martens. It might be longer than 35, but 35 is the most I know about. And when they stopped making the most of the Doc Martens, they decided to make their Solovairs under their own brand name, Solovairs. So I'm going to show you a couple of each, and we're going to go from there, and I'm going to explain the similarities and differences. So if you're familiar with Doc Martens, they kind of look like this. This is your traditional Doc Marten boot, right? This is a size 14, iconic yellow stitching, little airwear tag on the back, the airwear sole, right, nice and thick, a little tread pattern. Now these boots are gusseted. You can see right here, right? 360 degree Goodyear welt. That 360 degree Goodyear welt is a little different than a traditional one in the sense that they stitch the welt. The welt is stitched to the upper and the midsole, and then the sole itself is heat treated, i.e. melted, onto the boot, and that's how it's attached. Now, yes, you can still resole it, so, all right, all's well that ends well. One of the things I don't like about the Doc Martens is it has no shank in here, in the footbed. So a shank basically prevents you from doing this. If there were a shank, it would break, or I would not be able to do it because as much as I think I'm a superhero, I'm not. I'm an old man. So these are Doc Martens. These are your traditional Doc Martens, but these are made in Vietnam. This is a Solovairs. Now it's a different design. This is what they call a country boot. This is a derby boot. with all the broguing on it, but it's the same thing. Basically, you've got the same airwear sole, just slightly darker, with a slightly different tread pattern. Instead of the iconic yellow stitching, they have the less iconic white stitching. And instead of the iconic tag on the back saying airwear, they have a tag saying Solovairs, made in England. Now, it also lacks the gusset, right? So there's no gusset on this, which limits a little bit of the work usefulness of this, because things can get inside there, debris from, if you're using this to do like labor outside, you get rocks in there, or pieces of drywall in the house if you're doing something manly, I suppose. But it does have a shank in here. So that's what you get when you bend it. Instead of snapping a shank, or instead of just folding the shoe up like a clam, you end up with a shoe that has a shank. The shank's benefit is that it kind of supports the arch of your foot throughout the day, so if you're standing in these all day, they're more comfortable. And I will attest to the fact that standing in Doc Martens all day versus standing in Solovairs all day, even though everything is technically the same, it's night and day. The Solovairs are more comfortable long term because of that shank. They give you more support at the bottom of your foot, and if you're a big guy like me, the bottom of your foot is taking a beating. So why did they do this? All right, so I'm assuming, I wasn't there, and they say when you assume, you're probably right. So what I assume is that the guys at Solovairs or at NPS were like, right, they are shipping these shoes and the production overseas. We still have all the equipment, all the lasts. The lasts are the things you make the shoe on. We have the lasts, we have the patterns, we have the material, we have the distribution network. Let's just make Solovairs. So they started making these boots with their own name and sending them out. Now, it's the same leather, and I get this question a lot. I'm sure anyone who has Doc Martens or Solovairs does. Is that really leather? Because it doesn't look like leather. This is what leather looks like after it's been worn for a while, right? This is Chrome XL leather on a pair of old Wolverine 1000 miles, which I will be reviewing soon. Not the old ones, some new ones, but I'm using the old ones as a prop. So this leather is what I like to call heavily corrected leather. In other words, it's not high quality leather when you get it. So what you do is you sand the holy shit out of it until it's nice and smooth, and then I don't know how you get the color into this. I don't know if you spray paint it, stain it, color it in with crayons, whatever. On the inside, we have a leather lining, which is not specified, but is probably not cow leather. It's probably something more like, pig leather or whatever. But at this point, it doesn't matter because it's part of the boot. So, if I were going to buy a Doc Marten right now, if I said I'm going to buy a Doc Marten, I would definitely buy the Made in England version. But if I'm going to buy a Made in England Doc Marten, it's $260, $270. But if I buy a Made in England Solovairs, which is a Doc Marten, the same company making them, it's $210, $219. So why would I buy the Doc Martens? For the yellow stitching? I have a highlighter. I can highlight the shit out of anything. I would get the Solovairs. First of all, they have the shank, which is much better. Secondly, there's no gusset. And remember, these are not work boots. Right? If they're work boots, yeah, you probably want a gusset just to keep debris out from inside your shoes. But it's a lot easier to get boots on and off without a gusset, I have found. I'm old. I don't have a lot of time to spend putting on boots. I don't have a lot of time to do anything. Because everything I do is on the clock. Like one day, it's just, I'll be gone. So I don't want to know that, like, oh, geez, I could have gotten, I could have had more tacos, but I was too busy putting on boots. So what was I getting at? Oh, yeah, the Doc Martens versus the Solovairs. So the Solovairs are essentially Doc Martens, and Doc Martens are essentially Solovairs, or at least the Made in England versions. So why would I pay extra just for a yellow stitch and no shank? I wouldn't. I would pay less for the no shank, and I wouldn't pay anything more for the yellow stitch. So I guess what I'm getting at is don't be tricked into buying a Made in England Doc Marten when you could just buy a Solovairs with the same, and I should have pointed this out, they have the same models. This isn't the same as that. Like, these are clearly different model boots, but you can get these from Solovairs, right? You can get all the same models you would get from Doc Marten from Solovairs. and with different leathers as well. So you don't have to get the plasticky leathers. They have more grainy leathers, almost like a football leather type. So you can get more things from Solovairs in a lot of different colors and a lot of different sizes. So I would recommend, I'm not telling anyone to do anything because I don't have that power. I would recommend, if you want Doc Martens, get Solovairs. And if you need Doc Martens, remember, it's not 1989 anymore. I used to wear Doc Martens to every Sunday hardcore matinee I went to in New York. I remember seeing Agnostic Front and DRI and Sick of It All, you know, and running around in my little Docs. Nowadays, you know, I guess I would probably kind of sit and watch from a distance because I'm old. I don't want to break anything. But nostalgia, just remember in your head, you were wearing Solovairs back then. They just said Doc Marten on them. So you want the same boots, get the Solovairs. That's it. Review the two. Solovairs are better than Doc Martens. Boom.